As a kid, what was your worst shit, my parents are going to kill me moment? I was cooking in our microwave in my defense, it was an old microwave and it suddenly started making weird crackling noises. I looked in, and the interior roof has a small fire right in the middle. So I did the only thing an 8-year-old would do, I yelled fire, and sprinted out of the house, and left my mum who had to run out of the shower to put it out. I made a slingshot out of a piece of wood and some elastic. Thought I should test it out by shooting the back window of my parents' van. Slingshot worked. I tripped my little sister and she broke her arm. Amazing. She told everyone that she tripped over a stick, and she kept up the lie for 15 years until we were both out of college. We were young and took my GF's father's car for a spin into town. Avoided cops and had a great night. Rushed it back to the garage in time for the prefect crime. He walks in, and we are all smug in the knowledge we had got away with something major. Until he asks why his car is wet when it's been garaged all night. I really thought we were in for it, but he laughed it off before pulling me aside and advising me if we ever did it again, he would have my balls as a hood ornament. When I was 13, I got a new laser pointer. I'd get bored and shine it in people's windows at night for just a second, just enough to mess with their heads. One night a cop showed up on my porch and threatened to take me to jail. My mother was not amused. When I was 15, my parents went on a short trip and left me home alone. I invited 6 people over. 6. Around 50 or 60 came. There were kids there of all ages, and, obviously, things got pretty messy. Spilled drinks, broken candle holder worth $800. 00. The hot tub. Oh man, the hot tub was seriously disgusting. People went in with clothes on. I found bottles and cans at the bottom, not to mention how many people had likely gotten off in there. One friend got so drunk I found her on my waterbed, yeah. That's how cool I was. She had taken off the covers and was laying on the plastic, naked and rubbing herself all over. We covered her up and she soon ran into my bathroom and proceeded to puke everywhere. Everywhere. Shower, all over the toilet, barely in it, on the sink, and somehow on the freaking mirror. I made her clean it up herself. Here's the worst part of all. The holy shoot, my parents are going to kill me part. Until now it was all things I could clean up, but I found out shortly after calling it a night and telling people to head home that my parents' big liquor cabinet in the basement had been completely raided. Whiskey, rum, vodka, all sorts of big ass bottles were either empty or gone. I'm talking a good 35-ish bottles. The older kids that were their grade 12/OP guys actually stayed afterwards to help me deal with it. We gathered all the empty bottles we could find and filled them with either water and the right amount of coke to make the color seem right. Placed the bottles in the cabinet, making it seem as full as possible, and hoped for the best. F-ked up part. I never got caught. I was never asked about all the shooty alcohol in the basement. I finally asked my mother when I was about 28 and her eyes widened in shock. Apparently those bottles they used to give away as gifts to people, so they just never knew. TL. Doctor had a huge party, parents' liquor cabinet raided, covered it up, and got lucky as shoot. I lit a Mormon church dumpster on fire when I was 8 using a dried up palm tree branch. I ran away, but then came back to see if things got worse. The fire department and police were there along with the crowd, and a family that saw me do it and run away pointed me out to the cops. In 4th grade I drew some sexual scenes thinking I was the coolest kid in the world. I got caught by the teacher, so I ran toward the trash and threw the paper. The teacher ignored it, so I thought it was over. Later that day I'm in the teacher office. My dad was there, the drawing on the table. My life flashes before me. Made phone calls to online 6-story hotline. After finished listening I heard another click on the phone of my mum hanging up. She was listening to me listening to online phone 6 stories on the other line. Then at the end of the month a $300 phone bill came. Edit. I was 11. Edit again. No cliffhangers. Right after this my parents gave me my first and also huge sex talk. I was really too young for getting into this type of trouble. It made the whole rest of the week awkward. As punishment I had to apologize, give up my pocket money for a year. Also my Asian parents used this to pressure me into studying for A grades. The worst part was, just as the awkward phase passed the phone bill came which completely restarted the my parents are going to kill me process again. When I tried to throw a large stone over mom's car, I could not throw it over the car. I grew up in Canberra, Australia. Many dangerous fireworks were still legal back when I was 12, but the UFO firework I had obtained from a classmate was very illegal. Why? Because when you light one of these frickers, it zooms around like a wasp on ecstasy. My dad had ducked out to grab some milk, and my brother and I decided to light one of these bad boys on his third floor balcony. It zoomed straight down, landing on the highly flammable couch sitting on the second floor unit's balcony. Shit. The damn thing whooshed with flames, and we called the Firers. So my dad comes home to this chaos and looks seriously pissed while the Firers give my brother and I a very stern lecture. All the while thinking, oh frick, dad is going to be so angry. We'll have to replace the stupid couch. Oh frick, what if he tells mum? Grounded for life. All we got was another stern lecture, and when his neighbors came home, they weren't mad at all. The couch was out there because it was a piece of shoot. A very flammable piece of shoot. I think my dad was actually quite amused, and he said that he won't tell mum. Thank every frick in the entire universe, because she was very strict, and a tsunami of trouble would quickly engulf us. My mum and I were drinking one night 6 years later, and I confessed to our crime with a pounding heart. She had removed the pole from her butt by then, and she just laughed. Edit. Firers is Aussie slang for firefighters. End. When I was around 6 years old, the doctors had to have a pin put into one of my fingers to straighten it out. During school at lunch I pulled it out because I could. I soon realized I was fricked, and they had to put another back in. When I was awake. Not my story, but my father's. He and his brothers decided if they could push over a big ass boulder. Amazingly, with their scrawny kid arms, they did. Only problem was that it was on the top of a hill. To their surprise, they got their first lesson on physics. The boulder kept rolling, gaining momentum as it tumbled down the hill. To my dad's relief, he saw a big fence at the bottom and thought the boulder would just crash into the fence and stop its rocky journey into the innocent neighborhood below. To the kid's horror, the boulder hit a bump and it flew over the fence. My dad said his heart has never felt lower than that moment. The boulder crashed over on the other side, bounced haphazardly until it careened into someone's kitchen. It blew down the entire wall and settled into the middle of the house. The boys just stared at the now demolished home, looked at each other, then walked home. They never mentioned it to anyone until after my grandfather died. It is now a favorite holiday story, to my grandmother's horror. When I was about 10 I was playing with a friend who lived down the street. His younger brother and my younger sister both wanted to play hide and seek. We begrudgingly agreed and said we would be it first. We found this bucket of liquid and for some reason thought it was glue. It was at this point we decided to spread it all around the safe zone thinking if we couldn't catch them, it would stop them so we could tag them. It wasn't glue. It was some kind of solvent. My sister ran through it, slipped, and landed directly on her head. Blood and tears everywhere. Thought she was dead. Was convinced I was either going to jail or my parents would kill me. Turned out to be fine. Didn't even need stitches. Only grounded for like 2 weeks. On Thanksgiving Eve, when I was about 12, my mom, grandmother and I were finishing up the dishes. We were unloading the dishwasher and drying/putting away dishes. My mom and grandmother were sitting, and I was standing opposite them. I grabbed the cover of a crystal sugar dish. It looked like it had about a drop of water in it. So to be a wussies, I pretended I was going to throw it in my mother's face. She gave me a look like don't you dare, so I threw the drop of water in her face. Only it wasn't a drop. The entire dish was full of water. I soaked her face, water dripping off her glasses and down her face to her shirt. If looks could kill, I would have been dead on the spot. I was terrified. I figured I was grounded for life. But I got a respite. My grandmother started hysterically laughing, not just giggling, guffawing to the point of tears. She saved my hide. I love my grandmother. I got caught shoplifting when I was 13. Stealing video games. The worst part was that my dad worked for the railroad and was gone. So I had to wait over 24 hours for my punishment. My punishment was digging all the holes for fence posts around an acre and a half of land from sunrise to sunset. It took me most of my summer vacation, and I lost touch with a lot of friends because of it. When I was about 7 or 8, my mom worked at a dollar store run by my grandpa. It was in the next town over from where we lived, and so my mom would bring me to work with her. To pass the time I would play with random toys from the store. These toys included the lighter I managed to snag. I'd spend my days burning cardboard boxes out back and putting them out. You can imagine my terror when the store itself was lit up by a box I hadn't fully extinguished. TL. Doctor, my career as a puro ended in the 90s when I burned down a dollar store. When I was about 14, I told my dad to frick off. It was pretty much the first time I'd even sworn in front of my parents. The rage that came over my dad's face caused me to instantly run away. I ran into the garden, big mistake. With nowhere to go, I decided to run down the small alley down the side of my house. Scooted past the bins thinking I was a smartass as my dad wouldn't be able to get past. That feeling was short-lived as I heard dad pushing the bins towards me, quickly pinning me to the gate in front of me. It was then like a scene out of The Walking Dead as he was reaching over the bins to grab me. Let's just say I didn't do it again. TLD, told my dad to frick off. Ended up being pinned between a bin and a gate with my psycho dad trying to kill me. Edit. Typo. In high school I used to run our school's planetarium. It wasn't used anymore, and I loved astronomy, so it became my room. I kept my books in there, PlayStation, everything. When I first began using it, it was full of old computers that the school had been leasing, but didn't return yet. A buddy and I decided to try to get one up and running, so we could run astronomy programs off it, but they were all crap. One afternoon, a faculty member brought in the most beautiful computer. It was faster than any other one in the school, and we knew it would be perfect for our programs. We spent that afternoon doing a complete wipe of it and installing a new OS and all the programs we wanted. A day or two goes by and the faculty member returns. She tells us that that particular computer was not supposed to come in here. It belonged to blind, mentally challenged student and had $10,000 worth of programs formatted particularly for him. We told her we'd look for it and send it back. At this point, we're both thinking our lives are over, and I knew for sure my mom was going to kill me. We ended up wiping it again, saying that it was placed on some magnetic rocks that were in the planetarium, and sending it back to them. We never heard anything more. I graduated and never went back. Everything turned out better than expected. Edit. The overarching theme I'm getting here is that it really wasn't that big of a deal, and they probably fixed it. Thanks for giving my conscience some rest, guys. I crashed their cars, both of them, a little bit. When I was about 12, I was moving my dad's truck so it wouldn't block my basketball hoop. I knew how to drive just fine, so my parents were okay with me doing that. I made a critical error though. While backing the truck into a spot behind my mom's SUV, I didn't realize the tailgate was down. As I'm backing, I hear a huge crunch and the truck stops. I'm fricked. I got out to assess the damage, and the truck is fine. The SUV 1998 Land Cruiser had a very uniform crease along the liftgate. I said nothing. It was so perfect that nobody ever noticed, even when we traded the car in 5 years later. Me and my brothers were wrestling in the living room when my parents weren't home, and one of us was pushed into our big screen TV, and it knocked the screen, an old school projection TV. We knew we're gonna be in big trouble, and literally put on every pair of pants we owned in preparation. When I was about 9 years old, my mom went out and left my sister and I at home with our dad. He was an extremely heavy sleeper, so whenever he was our sole guardian, we knew we had our run of the house after about 10 PM. On this particular evening, my mom had left her Mac-Up on the bathroom counter. This was too tempting for me. I gathered my tools and went to work on my sleeping father. After a few minutes of carefully applying all of my 9-year-old boy Mac-Up expertise, I moved on and forgot about it. Fast forward. Apparently dad slept through his alarm the next day and rushed out of the house to work without stopping in the bathroom. Dad was a truck driver and not much of a fan of practical jokes. I can still remember when he got home. He opened the front door and just stared at me, not moving, not speaking. It was the one and only time growing up that I was genuinely afraid of my dad. I thought, shit, he's gonna kill me. Edit. TLDR, I put Macup on my sleeping father. He woke up late and wore said Macup to work. Mum asked me to defrost the freezer, which also involved scraping the ice off the inside. For some reason I thought a screwdriver was the most appropriate tool and ended up poking a hole in it. She wasn't very pleased. The new one cost £350. When I was in grade 8, this girl kept sending me love notes as a joke because her boyfriend thought it'd be funny for some stupid reason. Usually I just crumpled them up and threw them away, but one day I snapped and sent one back saying go suck on BFS name's balls. She saw it, laughed, and threw it on the ground. Of course the most hard-ass teacher finds that note and starts investigating about who wrote it. She found out it was me just as school was over, so she told me to come see her the next morning. That was the worst 16 hours of my life. I just knew that she was going to yell until I started bleeding from my ears, then call my parents who would kill me right there and there. I went to school the next day and turns out she forgot and the girl stopped sending me notes too, so everything went better than expected. I threw a Friday night party in grade 10 while my parents were away for the weekend. I was a pretty obedient kid up to that point, so my parents trusted me. Turned out to be a pretty awesome party with a bunch of good people. As expected, people became quite intoxicated and things got out of hand. One guy fell down the stairs and went headfirst through the drywall and passed out. This left a basketball-sized hole in the drywall and I started freaking out. My friends and I spent all day Saturday replacing the drywall and painting over the hole. I told my parents 5 years later over Christmas dinner and everyone was in tears, so all in all it ended as a pretty good story. My parents were pretty tough on me. I never partied, drank, went out with friends, nothing. Grades were everything to my parents, and so was my getting into college. When I was a sophomore in high school I thought I was going to get a C overall in biology, and I was freaking out about it for 2 weeks. I was going to bed crying every night because I was afraid of my parents' reaction. I finally told my mom that I thought my final grade was going to be a C before she could open my report card that we got in the mail. She said something like, well, I guess you can forget about college. Turns out I got a B. As a teen I was surprised I got off so easy, no yelling or anything before the report card was opened. As an adult I'm still pissed off by what she said. Edit. I keep getting asked, so no, I'm not Asian. I was bullied a lot when I was in the 6th grade, and my main nickname was Lesbo or lesbian, because I was really tomboyish and all around not girly. I would never tell my parents this due to the fact that my dad was a pastor, and I thought they wouldn't like me if I told them what the other kids called me so wrong about that BTW. My parents are the coolest people. One day I stayed homesick due to a stomach bug, and we had just gotten the new computer at my house. My dad was working at the church and my mom was sleeping in her room. I went down to the computer and looked up lesbians, lesbo, am I a lesbian, etc, etc. I found a quiz that I thought would tell me whether or not I was indeed a lesbian. I proceeded to take the quiz. It was filled with weird questions. At one point it said to watch a video to see if I was turned on. I played it with the sound all the way up, and Jesus, this is just an awful memory for me. I saw what they were doing and all I could think was, oh god, no, I don't like this. Turn it off. Then I heard my dad opening the garage door. My heart started pounding. I shut the monitor off and ran back to the couch I was supposed to be on and pretended to be asleep. As in laying there squeezing my eyes shut as hard as I can hear him turning the monitor on. I hear my dad say, oh my god, what? He comes into the living room where I am and he tells me to wake up and walk with him. As I get up I start to feel really sick. I've been caught. He's gonna hate me. I won't be able to convince him that this is not something I like. He proceeds to tell me that what I was looking at was pronoun and that it was a very unrealistic portrayal of sex. He said that it's not okay for me to be looking at this at my age. Even though there's a natural curiosity, I'm too young to be looking at this. Then he asks me how I found out about this kinda stuff as he looks at my Google searches. I told him that everyone at school called me that, and I wasn't sure if it was true or not, so I tried to find out. He sighed and asked what I thought at this point. I told him that I didn't like it and tried to turn it off when the video played, but couldn't figure out how. He deleted the history, turned off the computer, gave me a hug, and told me I lost my computer privileges for a month. It was the most embarrassing thing I've ever been through. We never spoke about it again. Even thinking about it now makes me cringe out of sheer horror. I have never felt that type of terror ever since. Haha. Edit. For those saying my dad wasn't very reasonable for punishing me after telling him why I looked this stuff up, I had gotten in trouble before this about just messaging random people on Neopets. I had a conversation with someone who claimed to be from the same state I was in. My parents freaked out, yelled, cancelled my goddamn account and told me the dangers of the internet, but didn't take my privileges away. The pronoun thing was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. Also, seriously, I remember this so well because it was freaking awful. I've never told anyone else about this incident cause it's still so ridiculously embarrassing for me think about. It's like permanently etched into my mind forever. I ended it bluntly cause my boyfriend was asking me what I was typing, and to tell you guys the truth, I haven't told him about this incident yet. My dad did explain what lesbian meant. He knew that I didn't come to him because I was afraid of what he'd say, and he told me that he loved me no matter what. He also told me about the birds and the bees later that day with my mother, which was a completely freaking horrifying. Edit to I guess you could lump me in the straight category, but to be honest I don't think it really matters. When I was in middle school we had one of those projects where you had to build a mini bridge. You started out with just the basic sticks and used push pins, the ones with the little colored balls on the end, then glued them together. I took mine home in a shoebox and immediately laid it on the floor because I was so over it. Later in the week my little sister was running through the house and ran into my room. All we heard were horrible screams coming from my room. We went in and she was on the floor with like 50 of those pins in her foot. Balls deep, I suppose you would say. She had stepped on the box so hard that many of them had actually bent inside of her foot. My dad took them all out, and I can't remember any other time that I was in so much trouble, except for the other time that she had to wear a heart monitor and I made her run laps around the yard to throw off the machine. I was a mean frick, I know. When I was 14 I rebelled against my parents making me go to an activity involving my sisters that had nothing to do with me. Lasted sometimes between 18 to 20 hours. I had absolutely no interest in and took place every single weekend in the summer. Nothing against my sisters, but it was pure torture for me. Of course, my mother's answer for everything was a beating. This would have been a very rare thing to occur in front of my dad, as she came towards me with that belt that I had hated for as long as I remember. I realized for the first time that I was looking down at her. I was bigger than her now. I decided right there that she was never going to beat on me again. I told her that, and I open-handed knocked her off her feet. Her eyes were big as saucers when she hit the floor. Then I thought I was going to die. My dad gave me a spanking, the only one I ever remember getting from him. I guess he felt that he had to do something. It was so mild compared to what my mother dealt out that it was almost a joke, but I didn't tell dad that. I survived and my mother never hit me again, although she continued to intimidate me in other ways until I left home a couple of years later.